You are listening to a true psychological horror story, one born from the darkest corners of the human mind. A story about schizophrenia, a mind split between reality and illusion. It starts with whispers you think you imagined, shadows that move when you blink, faces that appear where no one stands. For most, it's an illness. For others, it's a doorway, one that should never be opened. And for Clara Hensley, that doorway led straight into the walls of her own home. They say silence is peaceful, but in Brindlewood, silence was the loudest sound of all. Clara Hensley had once been known as a kind-hearted teacher, a woman who smiled at stray cats, baked for her neighbors, and loved her husband more than life itself. But now, the townspeople only saw her as the strange widow who talked to walls. Her husband, Daniel, had gone missing nearly a year ago. No note, no struggle, just gone. One day he was tending to their garden, and the next morning his side of the bed was cold, his shoes untouched by the door. The police searched, the neighbors gossiped, and Clara slowly stopped opening her curtains. The first few weeks after Daniel vanished, she swore she could still hear him. Not in dreams, but in the house itself. The faint sound of footsteps at midnight, a mug shifting slightly on the kitchen table, the whisper of her name when she stood too long in the dark, is greater than Clara. At first, she told herself it was grief. The brain does strange things when the heart breaks, but the more she tried to dismiss it, the louder it became. Clara began keeping a journal not to remember, but to prove. She filled page after page with dates, times, and descriptions. Is greater than March 14, footsteps in the hallway again. 2:37 a.m. March 18, male voice whispering from the vent. March 22 found the picture frame turned upside down. When she showed these notes to the local sheriff, he gave her a sad smile and a list of therapists. That night, she tore the paper in half and whispered to the empty air, "Is greater than, I know you're here, Daniel. Just tell me where." That's when she began hearing the knocking. It came 3 times, always from a different wall, always just before midnight. At first, it was soft, polite, almost. But soon, it grew impatient. Knock, knock, knock. Clara followed the sound each night, pressing her ear to the plaster, holding her breath. She swore she could hear breathing on the other side. The neighbors began to notice strange things. The lights in her house flickered for hours. Sometimes, her television turned on by itself, static humming through the night. And once, an old man swore he saw Clara digging behind her house under the full moon, whispering, "I'm coming for you." They thought she had lost her mind. But Clara was sure of only one thing: Daniel was trapped inside the house. Her psychiatrist diagnosed her with paranoid schizophrenia, prescribing medication and weekly sessions. But Clara stopped attending after 2 visits. Is greater than, you can't medicate the truth, she told him. The doctor's notes described her as fixated, delusional, suffering auditory hallucinations and vivid nightmares. But if that was true, why did the nightmares always show her the same thing? In her dreams, Daniel stood in the hallway, his back turned to her, his head tilted slightly, as if listening. And every time she tried to reach him, he whispered the same words, "Is greater than, I'm in the walls." One night, she woke to the smell of rotting wood and something else, something metallic, sharp, like blood. The sound of scratching came again, this time from beneath the floor. Desperate, she ripped up the carpet, her hands trembling as she pried up the wooden boards. Nothing. Just cold air rising from the dark space below. But then, she saw something glimmer, a small silver ring wedged between 2 beams. Her husband's wedding ring. Her breath caught. She screamed so loud the neighbors nearly called the police. But by the time anyone checked, Clara was silent again, sitting on the floor, clutching the ring, whispering, "Is greater than, he's waiting." From that night onward, Clara barely ate or slept. She began removing sections of wallpaper, convinced there were messages hidden underneath. And she was right, in a way. Scrawled faintly on the plaster were words written in charcoal, almost invisible until you looked closely. Is greater than, let me out. Her fingers shook as she traced the letters. That was Daniel's handwriting. She would know it anywhere. Her spiral became unstoppable. She covered every mirror, claiming the reflections spoke when she wasn't looking. She nailed the windows shut, muttering that something was watching from outside. She stopped answering the door completely. And then, the whispering changed. It no longer sounded like Daniel. It sounded like many voices, overlapping men, women, children, all whispering the same phrase. Is greater than he's behind the wall, Clara. She screamed at them to stop, throwing her lamp, her dishes, her photos, anything that would shatter the noise. But the whispers only grew louder. She started recording them, desperate for proof. But when she played back the tapes, there was nothing, only static. Until one night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., the recording picked up a voice. Faint, male. Is greater than... Clara, dig. She obeyed. With her bare hands at first, then with a hammer, she began tearing through the living room wall. Paint chips filled her hair. Blood streaked her fingers. Hours passed. Her breathing turned ragged. Then the hammer hit something solid, something that thudded instead of cracked. She froze. Dust filled the air. Her flashlight flickered. And then she saw it, pale, dry, and unmistakably human bone. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing, screaming, laughing all at once. Is greater than... I found you, Daniel. You were here all along. When the police arrived the next morning, called by a horrified neighbor, they found Clara sitting in the middle of the room, surrounded by torn wallpaper and chunks of plaster. Inside the wall was the skeleton of a man. Later tests confirmed it was indeed Daniel Hensley. He had been dead for a year. The cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head. The murder weapon: a hammer. The same hammer Clara had used to rescue him. They took her away quietly. She didn't resist. She only kept repeating one thing as they led her out. Is greater than he told me where to find him. At the psychiatric facility, Clara's condition deteriorated further. Doctors reported that she often sat facing the wall, whispering to it, pausing, and then nodding as if responding to someone unseen. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she said, "Is greater than, he's still inside. He never left me." A few months later, a night nurse at the facility filed a report. She claimed she'd heard tapping coming from inside Clara's room around 2 a.m. When she entered, Clara was asleep, but the tapping continued. Soft, rhythmic, coming from inside the wall behind her bed. Maintenance opened the wall the next day. Nothing inside. That night, the tapping returned. Weeks passed, and Clara's health declined rapidly. Her eyes grew hollow. She stopped speaking entirely. One morning, the nurses found her dead in her bed. No struggle, no wound, just gone. But what terrified them most wasn't her body. It was the words written on the wall behind her head, scratched deep into the plaster with something sharp. Is greater than, I'm not alone. No one ever figured out how she wrote it. Her fingernails were intact, and there were no tools in her room. Her body was buried next to Daniel's, just outside Brindlewood Cemetery. And yet, the new tenants who later moved into Clara's old house never stayed long. They all reported the same thing: scratching, whispers, and a woman's voice, faint and desperate, calling from the walls. Is greater than, please, help me find him. Some say Clara was schizophrenic. Others believe the house itself was alive, feeding on her sorrow, whispering truths she was never meant to uncover. Either way, Brindlewood has never been silent again.